I, I I am not a workforce development expert. Everything I know about workforce development, I have learned through my involvement with the Public Policy and Advocacy Office with ALA and hearing all of their wonderful updates on workforce development happenings. But I did find it very interesting to delve into learning more about workforce development and thinking about how generative AI changes the nature of work and of workforce development and thinking about those types of supports. I like to start out with this quote from Seth Godin, a marketing sort of guru. And what he really says is the time of good enough is now AI. If good enough works for you, that is all AI all day long. You're not going to hire a person to do good enough. Great is still going to be human, but good enough is now the realm of artificial intelligence. And I think that that's a critical viewpoint to take into this. I should also remind you, good enough in terms of ChatGPT is like B plus at a graduate school level. So if that sounds okay, if that sounds good enough, we're on board with ChatGPT. So let's talk about ChatGPT and some
Dr.
other
Harris,
things.
could you make your screen full screen? We're seeing your desktop along with the presentation.
Oh, I apologize. I am so sorry. There. Is that better?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. So what is ChatGPT? We're going to delve into that first. So if you do have some experiences with ChatGPT, let me know. If you have questions along the way, drop them in chat and I'll try and keep an eye out for that. But the website is at chat.openai.com. OpenAI is the company bringing you ChatGPT and other generative AIs that they're developing. And it does things like write sonnets in the style of Shakespeare, all about workforce development. And I don't know if you as a group have a song or a poem, but I thought that was pretty good. Oh, sing the praises of the library's door where knowledge blooms and betterments in store. That could be the new tagline for LibsWorks. So ChatGPT does all kinds of really fun and crazy stuff like this. But there are many other ways that we can put it to work. So what does this even mean? Let's start by talking about what's in a name. The chat aspect of ChatGPT means we are talking about an interactive chat bot. And so it is a primarily text-based conversation back and forth. It can be interactive. A lot of times you see people asking question, getting one answer, but it can set up to do a fully interactive style conversation as well. The GPT is kind of where the magic happens. And so what that stands for is generative pre-trained transformer. And we're going to dive into what that exactly means, but generative pre-trained transformer is what the GPT stands for. That's how it's using that large language model to create new content from its existing data set that it's ingested. And finally, we are up to version 4. We went very quickly from 3 to 3.5 to 4. And if you haven't played with 4, it does require the plus subscription at chat.openai.com. But version 4 is, there were significant advances compared to version 3 or 3.5. They have said that version 5 has not started training, so they may be sticking with 4 for a while to extend things out. So it is a chatbot, and I do want to make sure, chatbots are not magic. And I've done a lot of these conversations with teachers, with librarians, and there are quite often, somebody in the audience that is very concerned about AI. They have some real fear about artificial intelligence, and that's okay. The best way forward is to help people understand exactly what's going on. So as a school library person, my dissertation work was actually on using play-based and game-based approaches, analog-based approaches to teaching computer science to elementary teachers. And so I love, this is a thing that I developed with Rosen Publishing Group on their Kids Can Code series. And I have some other, books that I've written on computer programming and computational thinking for kids using these sort of analog approaches. And so even just going through this simple exercise of, thinking about a classroom chatbot, what is a chatbot actually doing? Well, it's just computer code. It's parsing or breaking apart a question. Like, what is being served in the cafeteria for lunch today? Well, first thing is, what kind of question is this? Well, this is a what question. So the answer is going to be a thing. What are the other important words in that sentence if we're parsing it? It's not really listening or understanding English. It's parsing out the important words. Served in the cafeteria can tell us, yeah, this is probably like a menu is going to be the answer. Lunch is the win, not breakfast. It's lunch today, not tomorrow. Those are the important words. So we can start to help people understand by showing them how they can interact in that chatbot type environment and work as a chatbot. Generative is a fascinating new word that has suddenly entered our lexicon in a whole new meaning. In generative, in the case of ChatGPT, means it doesn't just respond to a pre-programmed algorithm. Think about all those, chatbots on customer service websites where they try and help you just enough that you don't get angry enough to call and actually cost them money, but they don't ever seem to really answer your questions because they're just following a script. They can't actually do anything, and for the most part. But in this case, ChatGPT is generating. Now, it's mimicking is perhaps the better word than generating. Because even though you can see here an example of a 200-word essay from a first-person perspective about surviving a tornado, it didn't really just think back to an experience. It doesn't think. It's mimicking. And we can go out and look and find where it might have located the language to mimic. So, for example, in this National Weather Service website, they collect stories of people that survived tornadoes. And if you start to look at it, you'll see there's a lot of repetition of language, of experiences in these stories, and what ChatGPT generated through mimicry of all of those examples ingested when it went through that process of training on the internet. So remember, it doesn't really understand. It's trained to generate words. It's all math. So it's just using math to figure out statistically what word might come next. Your phone does this. Your email probably does this when it predicts, what word might be, or finishing a word or suggesting a word to come next. This is that same programming, same math, but at a much bigger level where it's able to mimic and generate a whole Shakespearean sonnet, as we saw, or the first person experience of living through a tornado. But it's not alive. Let's test this. We can do this again. This whole idea of making it real, making it less scary by engaging in the activity. So we can embrace the generation aspect. What word, drop it in chat for me real quick. What word might come next? The best thing about librarians is their ability to what? We see navigate, research, encourage, pivot, think critically, adapt, find, connect, identify. Yeah. Well, we can use Wolfram Alpha. Stephen Wolfram wrote a book that we're going to talk about in just a second, and we can go on to Wolfram Alpha, and we can explore this in a notebook, and we can actually load up the GPT-2 transformer, and we can run it through. The best thing about librarians is ability to, what are the next top probabilities? There they are, put them in a table so it's easy to see. And the top answer is make. Now I ran it further and I said, continue that. And it's, it was like make things understandable, help, provide, find, get. Those are all very similar words to what you came up with. And so that's how it's actually working. It generates the word make, and then it generates what word comes after that and what word comes after that. And word by word, you can watch it generate a whole paragraph. The P in ChatGPT stands for pre-trained. And so there's a little bit more information, but basically what it means is this is not running free on the internet. And that's a good thing, because AI models that are given free reign of access to internet content tend to go bad pretty quickly. There's a dark history of bias and other bad things of AIs that are loose on the internet. And so what they did for ChatGPT is they pre-trained the program, giving it very specific and controlled sets of data, and then doing a long process of teaching the program that's a good answer, that's not a great answer, that's a good answer, that's a better answer. And in that way, it was pre-trained so that it could generate more effective mimicry of speech and language and effective answers. So it is all pre-trained. It's not doing this on the internet on the fly, which means it does have a training cutoff date of 2021. So it's not good for current data, as we're going to see in just a little while. And then the transformer aspect. Yeah, it's computer science. And I don't fully understand exactly what's going on there, but that's okay, because Stephen Wolfram behind Wolfram Alpha wrote a book on what is ChatGPT doing and why does it work. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can access it for free on his website, the full contents. And basically the funny answer is they're not entirely sure why it works. It does, but the transformer part is all of that large language model of where it's going through that creation of the mimic language. And they're not entirely sure exactly what's going on inside the program. But this book does an amazing job of breaking it down if you want to go into some of the deeper information science and computer science understandings of what's happening inside of an artificial intelligence language model. So let's go forward into this scary space of benefits and risks. Now, of course, I just asked ChatGPT about it because, that's the easiest way to get started here. And here's what it came back with. Benefits of artificial intelligence, maybe increased productivity. I'll tell you, it's part of my workflow. I've been making extensive use of it in my job. Enhanced decision making, maybe. Limited by data set time. Job creation, that's possibly a benefit. You're going to see on the risks, number one risk there is job displacement. Improved safety, I think, is a possibility. The risks are enormous and really cannot be, overstressed. That we are in for a wave of incredible job displacement, I believe. This is going to hit white collar work as hard as robotics and automation hit blue collar factory work. And with that is going to come a widening skills gap, because all of this comes down to computational knowledge and experience. And if you don't have that computational knowledge, and I know, there's as much work happening in libraries still about teaching basic computer skills. It's still an issue that we're talking about. I think there is an unfortunate, ChatGPT used the word unique, I think an unfortunate distribution of benefit. This is going to hurt entry-level jobs and middle-level work a lot more than it hurts other work. And that's going to be a problem in a current environment that already sees sort of a lack of opportunity for our younger workers in some cases. And finally, there are many ethical and legal concerns. What are the ethics of the training practices? Who owns the output? Who owns the input? And so let's jump into some of these. In terms of productivity, like I said, I've been using this, and I use it as a getting started point. That blank white page is sometimes very daunting. So I've been working with the American Library Association's PPA, trying to write some op-eds. Well, I can use ChatGPT to help write a very early draft of an op-ed, but I'm not just turning it loose. And you're going to see this is the trick to using effective AI as part of your work process. I didn't turn it loose and say, write an op-ed. I gave it a prompt that was about a third of the size of the resultant op-ed that was generated. And you'll see in there my style, my turns of phrase, my language that I wanted to include, my points that I wanted to raise. And this is sort of the final prompt that I ended up using, but there were intermediary prompts along the way where, I added to it. I added more points. I said, oh, no, I wanted to really touch on this. Oh, I don't want it to include that. And so going through this work is how you truly get productivity out of generative AI. It can also potentially be used for some decision making and analysis. You'll see in this example, sort of looking at, what are, workforce development situation in the Paducah, Kentucky region. The problem is it's that cutoff knowledge date of September 2021. So it doesn't know what's going on right now. And 2-year-old data, 1.5-year-old data it's going to help, but it's not going to be perfect. So it can help with this, but it may need to be in a broader sense, not in a very specific sense. It can definitely help with tasks and sort of those basic level tasks. So here's an example. LinkedIn just launched this recently, where they will use ChatGPT plugin and AI generated to write to postings on LinkedIn. So you can just, from your information that you filled into LinkedIn, it will automatically generate a sort of welcome message that is very customized to the position and to your background and how those connect together. And so there's an example of, hey, this was a task that is kind of repetitive, and AI can possibly pull all the information together and draft something. But we do have to look at the disruption and the displacement of workforce. And again, I asked ChatGPT, what do you think? What can you predict is going on? And we'll look at some articles that really talk about this as well. But it's those entry-level positions that are going to be most at risk, as well as content creator positions. So this is going to be a huge risk that we're going to have to look at. It will be offset to some extent by job creation. However, you're going to very quickly notice that the jobs that are being created are relatively skilled, technical jobs, versus the jobs that are lost are more entry level or less skilled jobs. So that's that unequal, unfortunate distribution of benefit that was referenced earlier. And there are also ongoing concerns and problems. Like ChatGPT has a really bad habit of making things up. So just when things you're thinking, hey, I can use this, I can make part of this, make it part of my workflow. Things are looking good. Hey, ChatGPT, this was the 3.5. Could you help me write a newsletter article for teachers and school administrators about paragraph outline for planning purposes and include some relevant research? And sure enough, you'll notice in there, it did include a quote from educational researcher Nancy Hockman. But I asked it to include citations and quotes, and I noticed, hey, there's no citation. And I said, hey, could you give me the citations? Because I'm a librarian, I kind of like citations. And it came up with these really janky citations. I'm like, what? That's not a citation. And at the bottom, it said, note, these citations are made up. Excuse me? So these are fake quotes? Oh yeah, sorry, they're completely made up. These quotes don't exist. These researchers may or may not have ever written on this topic. So it has this really bad habit still of trying to make stuff up to help the prompter. That's one of its sort of first rules, is to be helpful to the prompter. So not a workforce development, but let's jump in and see where AI might fit in to workforce development. And I look forward to hearing your comments and feedback. I would recommend this book. If you're not familiar with Douglas Rushkoff's Programmer Be Programmed, does a really great job of talking about where we are in terms of algorithmic data and the role that computers and computerized interactions are taking in our lives. Now, one of the big things that Rushkoff points out is he addresses what he really calls a false equivalency of saying, oh, if you say everyone needs to have this computational thinking knowledge or computational experience or expertise, that's like saying to drive a car, you have to be a mechanic. And Rushkoff says, no, that's completely false. To not have computational thinking knowledge today, it's not that you're not driving the car, it's that you're sitting in the back of the car and the taxi driver is driving the car and they're taking you wherever and saying, this is where you get to go. You're going to be taken over and really programmed and used by algorithms and now generative AI if you don't understand what's going on and how they are being used for you or against you. Social media, shopping, everything online is so algorithmically controlled. It's very important that everyone have this level of computational understanding. So starting from that perspective, I'd say that the biggest thing that I've been telling everyone in education is don't freak out. Yes, AI is very good at the basic academic schools that we teach, but it doesn't mean we stop teaching them. And here's where I stop and I call out to the teachers, if I'm doing for teachers, any math teachers in the audience, because there was this lovely app that came out maybe 6 or 7 years ago called PhotoMath. It's just an app on your phone that you download and you just point your phone at the math worksheet and take a picture and it does all the math for you. And it shows all the work so you can copy it down. And I asked the math teachers, did you stop teaching math? No. Did you change how you teach and assess and assign math? Yes. So we're still going to be working towards teaching those advanced skills because that's where we're really trying to get. But to do that, we have to teach the fundamental skills. We're not going to stop teaching writing because AI can help us writing. In fact, understanding great writing is going to be more important than ever so that we can make use of generative AI to help advance our writing practice in a more faster way if we understand how we can use it, not be used by it. The answer is to focus not on the products, but on the process of learning in schools, but also the process of everything. So the product in workforce development, the product of the actual job is going to change. IBM came out, a week ago or so saying that they were placing a hiring freeze on, almost 8,000 jobs that could probably be replaced by artificial intelligence. And so they're not going to fill those positions. They're looking at attrition to, as people leave, see if AI can replace those. So the product is going to change and the process is going to change, but there's still going to be a process. So looking at the freelance writing, this is a fascinating article, and I'm going to share the entire presentation with you. Don't worry. But a fascinating article about, freelance writers and talking about, really that upending of the freelance world and with generative AI. But there's still going to be some type of process. So there's still going to be, that retraining of workforce development, that shifting, that helping people find new careers if their career is no longer sort of in existence. And so legal and finance may be most immediately at risk, but, I'm employed at an organization that includes career and technical education for our member high schools. Our career and technical education is booming. I can tell you that there are so many opportunities for internships, for apprenticeships, advanced manufacturing in the Northeast. They just can't get people. And so there are, career shifts and changes, but there's still a whole process of workforce development. For example, I think ChatGPT could really help with, resume writing. And so I heard the person's going to present, next month, talk about that resume process of translating maybe a foreign design resume into a more US familiar style of resume. Well, you can turn ChatGPT, since it is a chat bot, and for a conversation, you could say, hey, let's have a conversation. The library could, create a prompt that gets all of this started, sit someone down at the computer, start up the process, and then the interactive chatbot will go through and work with them and ask them all the questions needed. What did you do? What was your title? What were the things that you did in this job? Take it, turn it into resume friendly or resume appropriate language. And towards the end, we'll jump over to ChatGPT, and I've got this sort of loaded up so we can take a look at what that actually looks like. There's also, the existence of the interview process. ChatGPT can predict, hey, what are some questions if you were going for a customer service position at a local welding fabrication shop? What questions might they ask? But not only that, it can provide examples, both high quality and low quality examples of possible answers. Or you could enter answers in there and it could rate those answers. So it can give instant feedback maybe during a mock interview process as well. And so there are different parts of the workforce development process where I think generative AI like ChatGPT could find a home. The real big underlying factor is, of course, that AI does change everything. And it's going to be up to all of us to figure out how to make the technology work for us and not against us. This was something that, really hit me, because if you ask anybody 2-3 years ago, I would have been the first to tell you, no, computers, they can't do creative work. Your white collar creative, I mean, maybe like accountants. I mean, that's numbers. That's kind of the computer thing. But creative work, like copywriting, like, marketing development, graphic design, no. Yeah, I can't do that. But now here we are, and AI does kind of do that. Good enough, not great, good enough. And what does that mean? That this is really a big change in, we're going to be doing workforce development with creative workers, white collar workers, not blue collar workers. This isn't, a change in the energy sector or coal mining or factory shutting down. This is, whole sectors of paralegals or other things that are changing. If you've been following the writers' strike in Hollywood, one of the big issues there is they don't want to be displaced by ChatGPT. And there's a real risk of that. Reddit is an interesting place for getting feedback and comments. And, here was a lawyer that said, man, it nailed it. It wrote a perfectly persuasive legal brief. It made up the citations. It just kind of, but if it had access to Westlaw and Lexis, it would be perfect. But that's going to replace paralegal jobs that haven't already been replaced. It's going to replace those lower level lawyers that are spending all their time writing these briefs and things. It's not going to replace the actual, the partners that are, billing and making arguments in court, but there are big changes. Question in the chat, do you think there'll be changes to copyright and intellectual property laws? Yes, and we're going to touch on that in just a second here, but are there going to be changes in practices? I don't think there are going to be changes in law. Copyright law gets really messy and nobody really wants to touch it because nobody really wants to open it up for any kind of work. But sort of right here, this is Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, in an article that dropped, I believe, yesterday from the Walrus out of Canada, sort of asking about universal basic income. And so Sam Altman from OpenAI is saying, well, maybe we need universal basic income because, he's saying it could replace a lot of jobs, like all the jobs. Now, I think it's going to be a little further along for that. But, it really does open up a lot of questions of, hey, what are people going to do in a post-work economy if we get to that point? And how could libraries kind of shift and help? Um, there's already been a lot of conversation around universal basic income because the nature of work has changed so much. Uh, but people still need to feel that value in that participation in a meaningful task. So is that something that libraries can take on and think about and work towards? But I think it's a huge disruption that we are going to have to address in the not so distant future. What seemed like science fiction is kind of the present reality. Um, I think again, it's going to come down to it replaces, a lot of those creative things, the lawyers, lobbyists, programmers. But how do we work with that in schools and libraries? How do we think about shifting ahead of time, even before we get to the workforce development aspects or the questions? How do we shift into what is the new desired skill set? What are the things that we need to be teaching, like asking interesting questions? So that's a way that we can prepare the students of today to be more successful in an unknown workforce of tomorrow. And I kind of refer to this as the knowing where to tap. So there's this, old story, and I've read it with like Henry Ford and other people about, there's this machine that's not working, and then the old worker comes in and looks at it and, says, give me chalk or give me a hammer. And he thinks about it and listens to it and goes up and makes a little tap. Or the Henry Ford, he makes a mark with chalk and says, drill there. And then the mill owner doesn't want to pay him. He's like, what do you mean? You want me to pay you all this money? All you did was just tap with a hammer. And the old worker writes back and says, hey, to tapping the machine, that was nothing. The knowing where to tap, that's where all the money comes in. And it's that knowing where to tap and knowing how to make use of the artificial intelligence that's going to be one of those critical skill sets moving forward. But it all comes back to that understanding of computational thinking and computational awareness. And so, we can call it like the law of good enough. And so on the post about one of the posts about an article on what ChatGPT is doing to the freelance writing market, I really loved this comment to saying, saying it's better than bottom of the barrel freelancers is kind of crazy. That, those freelance websites, that gig economy sort of freelancing, you're not really paying a living wage. You're not paying anything that could be related to high quality work. And so that's why that's what ChatGPT is replacing. It's that good enough is going to replace that. If you want to pay nothing to a freelance, if they're actually good, they become, that level of great where the cost goes up and the value returned goes up. And so I think this is going to be really one of the key aspects moving forward in a lot of sectors. Is if good enough is okay, as Seth Godin said, right, the quote from the right at the beginning, good enough you're not going to pay for anymore. Good enough is going to be that AI developed thing, and great is where we're going to bring in humans and really look at that. So entry-level tasks and drafts, as I've been saying along, is kind of the thing. So I what about those writer strikes? Could ChatGPT and AI create a 30-second PSA about summer reading programs and benefits to parents? And so I asked ChatGPT to write a script with the descriptions of graphics and video footage. Give me the whole thing. And that's what it came up with. And I thought, well, hey, we've got these other types of generative AI that do images, and they do now video. You can do text to video. So I took all those things that had the scenes and I copied and pasted those into a text to video generator. And
this summer, give your children the gift of adventure, learning, and fun at your local public library. Our summer reading programs offer a variety of engaging activities that keep young minds active and help develop their love for reading. Research shows that children who participate in summer reading programs maintain or improve their reading skills, preventing the summer slide. Joining is easy, and the programs are designed for kids of all ages. Experience the joy of reading together, create lasting memories, and build a foundation for lifelong learning. Visit your local public library and sign up for the summer reading program today. Adventure awaits.
Oh, the faces. Generative image AI has real issues with faces and hands. Hands are really odd in most cases, but the script was generated by OpenAI's ChatGPT. Somebody else has this, neural text to video playground where obviously you saw some Shutterstock watermarks where they're going out and finding just like pictures. So they're taking pictures and trying to use AI to animate the picture into video. But this was free. And oh, by the way, this entire process took me about half an hour. So that's AI generated music. That's an AI voice. So that was not a voice actor. That was AI generated. So you don't have to pay any royalty on it. You don't have to pay any likenesses for these computer or AI generated faces. The script was absolutely good enough. Now, this was better maybe even than like a storyboard. If you gave that script and everything else to a video company, they could absolutely come back with stock footage. I probably could have done a better job just going out and searching for stock footage on like Pexels or something to build in there. But the script, it was all storyboarded out beautifully. I mean, everything was there. So yeah, that's good enough. That's what I'm saying by, who's going to hire an entry level or a freelancer when AI does that good enough? So in the end, it's that writing the prompt. It's that knowing where to tap. That's the new skill. That's what we're sort of having to work around and teach. So let's explore that a little bit further. There are whole new jobs and things coming up around this. There's prompt engineering, which is an entirely new field that's been created with words that have never been used in this way before. But prompt engineering is kind of the quality assurance, the testing of what happens. It's all around the pre-training process. And so people are hiring prompt engineers now. Well, guess what? Actually, librarians would make really good prompt engineers. If you wanted to go out and turn your low-paying public library job into a six-figure prompt engineer job, I think there'd be a really high level of overlap of skill set there. So that's one aspect. But building the next AI, Apple's hiring machine learning infrastructure, deep learning and reinforcement learning. Again, these are all artificial intelligence careers. And this is one of the big things that they're pushing. And so there are new jobs, but we have to prepare not only in workforce development, but this comes into earlier training in schools to make sure that people are ready to take on these new positions that are being created. Learning how to swing the hammer is a big thing. Wired has this great story about taking your ChatGPT prompts to the next level. And a lot of these things, again, this could be, whole workforce development workshops, whole things about, what do you do? How do you write a better prompt? How do you create that effective sort of magnification of your work process through a more effective prompt? Or as Elizabeth just posted in chat, how do you take on, that side hustle of the whole work from home where you're multi-jobbing and getting a couple of paychecks? There are opportunities. Or you could just go ahead and put a thing up on Etsy of 5,000 plus results there of buy your ChatGPT prompts through Etsy. I can't even imagine how bad these are. But what's really crazy is ChatGPT can write its own prompts. And so I'm sure they just use ChatGPT to write their book of 3,100 ChatGPT prompts. But there you go. you can help others on an Etsy marketplace. So the real question that we want to focus on is what comes next, and how do we prepare? I don't know. I know I'm supposed to come on and give you the answers. I don't know. It's all changing way too fast. I had to update this morning because the walrus thing came out. I mean, it's all crazy. I don't know. But let's do a little bit of futuring. Let's do a little bit of thinking. What's the story of AI? This is what the public's going to be thinking about maybe when they start hearing all these stories about AI. We have some example stories and they're not all happy. AI there was this breakdown in 2001 Space Odyssey. AI took over with Skynet and Terminator 2. Humans became overly reliant on AI in Wall-E, and look what happened. There's one story, maybe Big Hero 6, about sort of finding harmony with AI, which is great. But if these are the stories that we're looking at, what is the story of AI that we're going to help people understand? But coming back to where are we in libraries, not only in workforce development, but writ large, another Wired article here that really talked about, after generative AI comes in, who are we as people? Because, and this article says, especially for men, that sort of sense of purpose that one derives from job is so critical. We certainly see this in all the research around the health implications of someone being laid off. There are very real physical and mental health implications for the loss of that career or career identity. And now this is coming for more white collar positions where it hasn't happened as much in the past. And so I think we are looking ahead to an entirely new clientele set, perhaps coming into libraries looking for this workforce development assistance. So I think that is certainly an interesting thing that we are going to have to talk about in libraries more. There's this fascinating concept of data dignity that is also emerging. And there was a great quote from this article in the New Yorker, that data dignity really looks at the fact that these artificial intelligence training sets, especially around image AI, are built off of work from people, from humans. And so this again gets back to that idea of a universal basic income or something, that humanity collectively writ large wrote all of the content for the most part on the internet that is used, all the books, all the websites, all the Wikipedia articles that were used for the pre-training sets for generative AI. And so should not generative AI companies give back to humanity? And how does that happen? And what does that look like when there is some payment for the work product that has now been sucked into these large language models? I think another aspect that we're going to have to look at, and again, I apologize, I don't have all the answers, but computational thinking for adult learners. Again, as I shared, this was the topic of my dissertation research, was looking at computational thinking and teaching elementary school teachers how to be more confident teaching computer science and computational thinking, but then looking as well at assessments of computational thinking. And, so I started just, basic searching Google Scholar about computational thinking for adults, and there really isn't much out there. There is not a strong, body of research and work on teaching adult learners computational thinking. So when you think about all of those workers at risk of being displaced by artificial intelligence, any future work they're turning to is probably still going to be based to at least some extent on not only basic computer skills, but also this computational thinking aspect of understanding what's going on in artificial intelligence, computer programming, sort of those larger concepts of computational thinking. Little side note, that citation, the second one there for Roman Gonzalez, out of Spain, I used one of his computational thinking tests for middle school students in my dissertation research. But here was that first one. If you have access through SagePub, there's also an advanced access there on the second link. But here was an example of their an assessment test for computational thinking test for adults that we can use. So, one of the aspects in education is sort of this idea of backwards design of lesson plans. Start with the assessment, then work backwards from the assessment to design your instruction. So is that something that we in libraries can do, is work backwards from this algorithmic or computational thinking test for adults and work backwards to develop the instruction that we need to do. But I like this idea of, after finishing your long paper, you discovered a mistake, all 4s should be 7s and all 7s should be 4s. How do you use like find and replace to make that happen? Well, this is it's a computer science kind of question. Basically, the short answer is you turn all the 4s into some other character, turn all the 7s into 4s, turn all the other characters into 7s. But it's a multi-step process of doing that. And again, this is not knowing computer science. This is being able to think through in a computational algorithmic way what multi-step process would a computer do, or would I have to direct a computer to do? Not that I know how to have to write the code to direct the computer to do this, but I know that I need to direct the computer to do some type of process. And I think that's really an important part, because that's been a big thing in software development for a while now, is this rise of no-code programming. The real skill in computer science is the idea. The writing the code is the easy part. It can be outsourced, it can be offshored, or it can be turned over to artificial intelligence. But the idea generation of what is an app that's needed, what do we need the computer to do for us to solve an existing problem, that's the thinking, that's the knowing where to tap. And so a test like this could help us sort of assess that and then lead to instruction around that. So what questions do you have for me? I wasn't sure if you would have some. I hope you will. But if you don't, I asked ChatGPT what questions you might have after a workforce development conversation. And I thought these were pretty good questions. So I don't know if you have questions from here or others. We can drop them in chat, or I unmute and ask. I do want to share, there's my contact information. And there is a bit.ly link, capital letters do matter, or a QR code if you want to grab that. But this full presentation is shared there, and it's Creative Commons licensed. Feel free to use it however you want, remix it, whatever, make use of it, spread the word. So I'm going to stop my sharing, and I'm going to share real quick again with a ChatGPT session, just so you can see. I talked a little bit about that resume creation. It kept going in there, and I think that's fascinating. And so it really can be this like form built type of thing, where if you had some knowledge, or you're at an organization that can do this. The big thing about ChatGPT is the API access in. So you could build an API model where this could be a more easily formatted type of thing, where it builds in directly. In terms of those interview questions, it gave, I asked it for answers to a couple of the questions, low quality, high quality answers. And it does a pretty nice job of giving you those exemplars and those less stellar examples of low quality, high quality answers. So there are lots of possibilities there. If you want to see a difference between, here is an example that I used when I was presenting some librarians in Ohio about sort of the difference between GPT 3.5, which is the current publicly available model, freely available model, and GPT 4.0. Just the richness of information from the same prompt. All of a sudden, right away, we're getting more details, more information. If you know anything about Skyline Chili, it goes right into the three-way, the shredded cheddar cheese. It doesn't tell you how neon, incredibly unhealthy orange that cheddar cheese on top is, but just the additional details about, sort of that potential influence from pasticcio in Greek food that is just not really here in the 3.5. They talk about, toppings, but they don't talk about it as being three-way, four-way, five-way. They don't talk about, other things that go in there. So there is a real difference. And again, the 4.0, to get access to that, you do have to have a plus subscription at $20 a month. So looking at the questions, yes, the QR code again at the end, or let me share that again. Yes, accessibility aid is huge. When I talk with teachers, we talk a lot about the fact that ChatGPT does a very nice job of differentiating text complexity. And so you can ask it to write something at a specific text complexity and understanding level. And then you can ask it to modify vocabulary and text complexity to assist with other reading levels, lower level reading levels, without changing the content, but just lowering the complexity. It also does a very nice job of translating. So I've checked it against a couple languages and back translated in Google Translate, and it comes out very nicely. And yeah, the link is in there in chat as well. Any other questions? Anything you want to see it do?
Dr. Harris, thank you for doing this. Would you mind to put up those prompt questions that you created again? Because that was some interesting.
Yeah.
So
here were some of the questions that I was, or that ChatGPT thought about. So I was trying to think about answers to them. That equitable access is going to be so critical. Because it's not equitable. Access is not equitable right now. To get access to the 4.0 model, which is pretty limited still, you do need to have that monthly subscription. 3.5 is good, but 4.0 is much better. And so one possibility is to create API-driven access points that are very specific to a specific task or something. Because in the APIs, the access charges could be paid for by the library or whoever does the thing. That's one possible way. You do have to have an account to sign in, but there's nothing that says that a library can't have an account and do it. There are privacy issues though, so you do want to be careful with that, and we do need to definitely keep an eye on that. They just released an EU compliant model last week, and that EU compliant model will be coming to the US at some point. They were very unclear as to when. Probably it would be sped up if they were forced by new regulations, because this certainly caught the attention of the White House and others. FTC has been all over this as well. But they are going to come out with a business model, a business plan, they said, where you will have much more control over data privacy of what goes in. Oh, how do you keep paces? Polly, I don't know. You know, it's the same thing in education of how do we keep pace with this? The best answer I can give you is to focus on the underlying concepts of computational thinking, because the underlying concepts of computational thinking are sort of that base level of underlying computer science and information science and a lot of other things where those aren't changing. The implementation may change, the power and the productivity of artificial intelligence change, but notice I didn't write a new like chatbot, classroom chatbot that I shared at the beginning. That was from like 2015 from a computational thinking book that I worked on. Computational thinking is that sort of baseline understanding of being able to understand how computers work. You don't have to write the code, but you need to understand how code works, what computers are working, their work process. It's not a thought process, but it's their work process. So really focusing on those understandings, I think, can help people become more resilient and more adaptive as things change. Potential biases and ethical concerns. Bias is huge in artificial intelligence, and it needs to, there needs to be constant accountability and constant attention given to it so that it can improve. The companies that are doing the training need to be thinking about it. And I think it is important that these companies be held accountable, probably through regulation. FTC did come out and put out sort of some statements, and basically, I mean, plain language, they basically said, don't mess with people using AI. Companies that do that are going to they're going to catch the attention of the FTC. They are not looking for that. They do not want to see that, because there's so much potential around these, voice generations with just very short voice clips to create, familiar sounding voices to match writing styles of different folks. There's huge potential for misuse. Other questions there? Andrew, absolutely. One of the big things that I've been pushing when I talk with educators is that, the knee-jerk response in education, especially in educational technology, is to just block. And so there are a lot of places that have just blocked this. One of the concerns is the terms of service for example, for OpenAI say not for use by anyone under 18. Although if you ask ChatGPT itself, it says 13. But that really prevents access to it for a lot of our students. And so most schools are blocking it for students. My response is, hey, when social media first came out, we blocked that. We didn't talk about it. And look how that turned out for us. So we need to talk about this. We need to educate teachers. We need to educate parents, because we need to educate current and future workforce. Because this is a monumental change. And the best way through it is really teaching about what it does and how it can be used for good and for positive impact.
I'm wondering, this may make me sound like a I don't know, maybe a Pollyanna or a utopianness, but could one of the potential positive impacts of AI is that we sort of changed our values evaluation of non-knowledge workers, and that can give folks more opportunity to do things that aren't necessarily white collar, that may not be their passion.
Absolutely. As I said, I work at an organization where a major focus is career and technical education at the high school level, and I am so honored to work here. Seeing what the trades are doing is unbelievable. I think one of the real problems in our country is this push to send everybody to college when they don't have a plan for what they're going to do when they come out from college. And I try and talk to schools, and I try and convince them, don't just celebrate that the kids got accepted to a college if they don't have a major, if they don't have a work plan for coming out. That's the real key thing.
One of the things we hear employers talk about a lot when it comes to work skills is, for a few years it was STEM, and now the last couple of years it's been soft skills. Where might you see a potential for something like AI in general or ChatGPT either assisting with that for somebody who may not have great soft skills? Or
there was a story in NPR, I think it was yesterday morning, about these two guys that had developed a dating app assistant that would use generative AI to help come up with catchy opening lines on Tinder. And my wife and I were listening to that, and we're looking at each other like, well, that may get you in the door, but if you're then if you can't continue the conversation on the date or whatever, that's not really going to help you. And so I worry that it may become a crutch, but it could also become a real opportunity for working in education with students with special needs. One of the biggest training opportunities and interactive opportunities for students with autism is working through scenarios, and an AI that is this capable in terms of mimicry can work through scenarios. We saw that in the early days of the Bing with ChatGPT adoption, and everybody was poking the AI and then surprised that the AI responded in an entirely appropriate human mimicry way and said, if you're not going to call me by the right name and be polite to me, this conversation is over, go away. And people said, oh, the AI turned me off. I'm like, well, you poked the bear. Eventually, if you poke a human enough, they're going to get upset with you. Unfortunately, we're seeing enough of that in the news right now. Ringing doorbells is apparently not allowed anymore. But that's a huge issue. So I think it can be an assistive device, but it needs to be an assistive device that is used for training. Because if it's going to be a persistently assistive device, I think then we can start to tell the story of WALL-E as a cautionary tale of, if we're over-reliant on AI, to do all our conversation on Tinder, at some point there's a face-to-face meeting and, it's not going to match up. So is this the new sort of catfishing of workforce development of, hey, that was a great resume and a great email, and they show up to the interview and they can't put, a coherent sentence together, and they have very poor soft skills. Yeah, that could be a real concern.
But at the same time, since the bar has kind of shifted, if people can't get their foot in the door, but they can use ChatGPT, especially for jobs that don't require any computer skills, requiring an online application or a resume.
Yep.
There might be some, I like the way that you help, like the conversation to develop the resume. It could help to develop that and make that process a little bit easier. So I think this has generally been a very positive, like, I mean, it's a cautionary but positive view of ChatGPT. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you consider it from a workforce developer's perspective, you have to be cautionary but positive. If you consider the process, if you consider the product of workforce development, oof. I mean, this is going to just lay waste to whole swaths of the workforce in ways that we haven't even figured out yet. But in terms of process, there's a lot of potential and a lot of opportunities to make use of this tool for the ongoing process of helping folks retrain, discover, entry points into new job opportunities that are creative. And again, to speak to your point there, Andrea, I think, there's a real opportunity for your next month's topic of how do you help those people who may be coming from, another country adapt to, the workforce application, resume style, things here, language barrier to overcome those. I think there's huge potential.
I really like thanks for the presentation. I like the positive spin, because you don't want to be too negative, because there's not a lot you can do about it anyway. So
No.
gotta embrace it. So we've had instructors who have done that in our, so mostly we have a lot of ESL classes here, and then we have some professional development classes, and the instructors have picked it up really quickly in specifically the resume and the cover letter classes. They were like, we're not going to spend 2 hours of class time on cover letters or resumes anymore. Like, you have all your basic information, and just like you did, they gave that to ChatGPT, and they all had good enough resumes and cover letters in a minute. And then you can tweak it. Then you can change it a little bit. But the generative process was halved. I mean, it would be like homework from week to week. They would do it, and then it was like, okay, here you go. We did it in class. It's done. And that was really helpful. And we're playing around we have like standardized tests that our students take, like pre and post tests. We're trying to see how quickly we can generate kind of like practice tests based on, the tests that the students are going to take, instead of having our instructors go in the resource room and spend hours like developing multiple choice questions, kind of just working on like the prompt engineering. Like you
Use version 4 for that, and it will do a very nice job. I'll tell you the other really strong skill that it can be trained to do within a specific. So each one of those little sessions, if you see on the left side of the session, so you can train a specific session to evaluate writing. And so if you give it sort of the prompt, so if you're doing cover letters, you can prepare that ChatGPT session and say, hey, here's the rubric I want you to use for scoring it. Here's the exact task definition. Now I'm going to feed you the example, and please evaluate it and give feedback as to changes that could be made to increase this from a level 3 to a level 4. And it will provide specific and actionable feedback. And then you can tell it, hey, rewrite that specific actionable feedback at a lower reading level and be very encouraging. And so, for teachers that are working with essays or something, but even in writing a cover letter or things like that, it can provide that instant feedback with actionable items for improvement. Yeah, those chaotic brain emails, like, I'm serious. I'm using it for chaotic brain op-ed type pieces for our work in ALA, where I'm just able to say, hey, here are some thoughts I have. Let me see if ChatGPT puts it into something where I think it's worth my time to continue. I'm not using it for a final product. It is a draft, but it gets me from jumbled mess to a thing to be edited if it looks like there's merit in there. Well, if anybody has follow-up questions or they want more information, there's my email address. Feel free to follow up. The bit.ly link was there, the presentation's there. If you have other questions or I have some other sort of resources, happy to share. I love sharing things and happy to do other workshops, or, you know, if you state conference or looking for speakers to come in, let me know.
Thank you so much. So if anyone has any other questions, comments, discussion, now is your chance. Otherwise, we'll see you next month for Ben. Yeah. All right. All right, I'll post the recording and send out that follow-up email tomorrow. Thank you again. Have a good rest of your
Bye,
day.
everybody.